All right, let's dive into a really fascinating corner of social psychology, one that kind of flips a common sense idea completely on its head. We're going to explore the surprising and honestly often backwards relationship between what we think we believe and what we actually do.
So let's just start with a super simple question. Do your attitudes guide your actions? I mean, it seems obvious, right? If you believe exercise is good for you, you go to the gym. If you think a political candidate is the best choice, you vote for them. Simple as that.
Yeah, for most of us, the answer is a big, fat yes. We really like to think of ourselves as these rational, logical people. Our attitudes are the captain of the ship, and our behavior is the crew just following orders. It's all very neat, very tidy. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not even close?
Okay, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to solve a puzzle that has been bugging social psychologists for decades. And our investigation starts with, of all things, a pretty surprising road trip.
So, let's travel back in time. The year is 1934. A sociologist, a guy named Richard Lapierre, is about to go on this epic journey across the United States. Now, you have to remember what was going on at the time. This was a period of really intense and widespread prejudice against Chinese immigrants in America. The social climate was not great.
So Lapierre's study had two main parts. First, there was the road trip itself, where he was just watching what people did in the real world. Then, there was a follow-up survey, where he asked them what they thought. And it's this comparison, the actions versus the words, that's where things get really interesting.
Get this. For 2 years, Lapierre travels with a young Chinese couple, and they visit 250 different hotels and restaurants. He's just watching for one simple thing. Would they be served? Now think about the social climate I just mentioned. What do you think is going to happen?
Okay, out of 250 places, they were refused service only once. Just one time. So in person, face-to-face, people's behavior showed almost zero discrimination. Their actions were basically saying, hey, everyone's welcome here. But that is only half the story.
So, 6 months later, Lapierre sends a survey to every single one of those places they visited. He asks a really simple, hypothetical question. Will you accept members of the Chinese race as guests in your establishment? Now, based on what actually happened on the road trip, you'd expect them to say, sure, of course, right? But what do you think they actually said?
The results were just staggering. Over 90%, that's 9 out of 10, of the very same places that had welcomed the couple in person said on paper that they would refuse to serve Chinese customers. Their stated attitude was the complete opposite of their actual behavior. I mean, this huge disconnect just sent shockwaves through the world of psychology. And it raised one giant question. What on earth is going on here?
Well, the answer to that puzzle finally showed up a couple of decades later, and it came in the form of this incredibly powerful theory that explains the wild mental gymnastics we all do when our actions and our beliefs just don't line up.
And this is the absolute key. The theory basically says we've got it all backwards. It's not our attitudes guiding our behavior. So often our behavior comes first, and then we actually change our attitudes to match whatever it is we just did.
This whole thing is called cognitive dissonance. And it's that tense, really uncomfortable feeling you get when you do something that goes against a belief you have. Like, you believe in being healthy, but you just demolished an entire pizza. Or you think you're an honest person, but you just told a little white lie. You know that kind of squirmy, cringy feeling inside? That right there is dissonance.
And that internal struggle, our brains are basically wired to hate it. Inconsistency sets off this little mental alarm bell. And look, since you can't go back in time, you can't unlie or uneat the pizza, the easiest way to shut that alarm off is to just change the belief. We rationalize. We tell ourselves a story. So how do we know this is really a thing? Well, let's look at some classic and kind of mind-bending experiments that show just how powerful our need to justify ourselves really is. This cartoon, it just nails a phenomenon called effort justification. Think about it. The more time, money, or even pain we sink into something, the more we have to believe it was worth it. Because the alternative, admitting we just wasted all that effort, creates this huge, uncomfortable dissonance. So in this famous study, a bunch of women wanted to join a discussion group, and to get in, they had to go through an initiation. For some, it was pretty mild. For others, it was severely embarrassing. But here's the twist. The discussion group they finally got into was designed to be incredibly, painfully boring. And the results? Well, they speak for themselves. The women who went through the really tough initiation rated the boring group as way more interesting. They had to. They had to justify their suffering by convincing themselves, you know what? This group is actually great.
All right, here's another one for you. Put yourself in this situation. You've just spent an entire hour doing a task that is mind-numbingly dull. I mean, watching paint dry is more exciting. Then, the experimenter comes up and asks you to lie to the next person in line and tell them the task was really fun. Now, for telling this lie, you get paid either $1 or $20. So, which group do you think ends up saying they actually enjoyed the boring task more? The $1 group or the $20 group?
So the results are totally counterintuitive, but they make perfect sense once you understand dissonance. See, the people who got paid $20, they had an easy justification for their lie. Hey, I did it for the money. No dissonance, no problem. They still knew the task was boring. But the people who only got paid $1, they had a problem. $1 is not enough to make you feel okay about lying. So to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling, their brain did something incredible. It changed their attitude. They convinced themselves, you know what, I didn't lie for the dollar. That task actually was kind of interesting. Now, this stuff isn't just about small, personal things like boring tasks or joining a club. This same mental engine, this drive to rationalize, it scales way up. And it can actually help us understand some really big societal and political patterns. For instance, this powerful need to reduce our own discomfort can lead us to defend the social and political systems we live in, to see them as fair and just, even when there's a lot of evidence that says otherwise. And believe it or not, this same powerful mechanism helps us cope with our absolute deepest anxieties, which we're going to talk about next.
So there's this idea called terror management theory. And it argues that the basic knowledge that we're all, eventually going to die, it creates this potentially paralyzing terror. And to manage that terror, we cling even tighter to our cultural worldviews, to things that give us self-esteem, our family, our country, our religion. Why? Because those things feel like they'll live on after we're gone. They offer a kind of symbolic immortality. And this has some seriously powerful real-world effects. Take the 2004 US election, for example. Researchers found that when they simply reminded people, even subtly, about their own mortality, their political attitudes actually shifted. Support for the president at the time, George W. Bush, went up. And why is that? Well, the theory goes that when we're faced with that kind of fundamental threat, we tend to rally around the leaders and the symbols that represent and defend our worldview.
So, okay, after going through all of this, what's the big takeaway for you and me, for our own lives? Well, it really comes down to learning how to spot this process when it's happening. This really gets to the heart of it all. We are not rational creatures, we are rationalizing creatures. We have this incredibly powerful, almost automatic need to justify our own behavior. We're not logic machines, we are storytelling machines. And the hero of every single one of those stories is a smart, competent, and consistent version of ourselves. And so that leaves us with one final question for you to chew on. Whether it's that expensive gadget you just had to buy, the job you chose, the relationship you're in, or the beliefs you defend so passionately, where in your own life might you be subtly changing your attitude to justify a behavior? Where are you telling yourself a story to make peace with something you've done? Just spotting it, that's the first step to understanding ourselves a whole lot better. Thanks for joining me.